All right, well, welcome to the Sports Guys. Another episode. Really glad to be back with you. We just got back from Charlottesville, went to see our Wahoos play. Unfortunately, they did not win. They lost to Maryland after a really solid first half, and was hoping they could go 3-0 for the first time in 8 years. Didn't happen, but we had a great time and saw a lot of cool people. Saw our cousin Tommy and got to be with our dad and his longtime friend John Now, who let us come up in the box, which was awesome. And went to see James Madison's house and did a lot of cool stuff. What did you think of the weekend, Robbie?
It was a great weekend. We had a really nice time. Other than the realization that we were going to lose that game, everything else was really, really good, really fun. I want to apologize. I kind of lost my voice last night screaming. So if it crackles, hopefully we'll cut that out. But I might have some audio problems with my voice today. My voice took the big L also.
I think the fans can understand, and mine's a little bit rusty too. So anyway,
it's been kind of crackling like a teenage boy.
That's right. Let's talk like 2 minutes about that game. So Wahoos are leading at halftime. Virginia, Maryland, huge rivalry. We're sitting at 2-0 for the first time in a long time. We didn't know if we were the team that we saw last night, or if we were the team that beat Wake Forest, or if we're somewhere in between. I told you before the game, my biggest worry with Calandria is that he is a gunslinger and that he just turns the ball over way too much and makes bad decisions. He also makes incredible throws like he did to that number 11 on our team in the second half. And so he shows you these huge throws he can do, and then he'll make, two just head-scratching throws in a row. You just don't know what the heck he's doing. So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are pretty much both you and Dad said different versions of the same thing. And I don't want to go too far into the game because I'm sure most of our viewers don't care that much about Virginia football except for our UVA friends. But at the end of the day, it was very instructive. You guys said something like, I don't know if we can compete with Big Ten. And I was saying, well, what other reasons do we have to believe Maryland is legit? Is it other than just they're from the Big Ten, so they're going to beat us? There was something to that I think ultimately we dominated the first half, and somehow part of it was our fault, part of it was their defense. We just weren't able to score touchdowns. And then the second half, I think both lines of scrimmage, they just wore us out. They had bigger guys, they were deeper, and I think that's where you guys had a pretty good point about the Big Ten. If we had had the lead we probably should have, it probably should have been a really close game, because when they came back and we had trouble stopping them in the second half and we had trouble moving the ball on them in the second half, we would have had a lead that we could protect a little bit, and it would have been an interesting ending to the game, as opposed to just we couldn't stop them and they were basically pretty close to tied at halftime, so they just kind of whooped us in the second half. I don't think they were significantly better. I just think they wore us out physically.
Well, we were up 13-7 at half on an incredible run by Calandria, but it should have been about 23-7. And so, and we knew at halftime we were all eating and having a beer and talking about how we left some points out there, and that might really come back to bite us.
They stopped us multiple times in the red zone, on the 2-yard line, on the 5-yard line. Hats off to them, but I really was screaming. Part of my voice being gone was the play calling. So I think ultimately it was instructive in that if you're going to beat these Big Ten teams and SEC teams that have these monster lines, you're going to have to get out to a nice lead, and you're going to have to really your skilled players are going to have to come up huge. You said it yourself. You're going to have a clean sheet. We had, I think it was 5 turnovers. They had 0. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, the wheels just came off the wagon. But I think we played really tough the first half. And I think a lot of ACC teams, this is why the ACC teams aren't really measuring up for the most part. There are a few at the top. But I think that's where we're most out of sorts. It's not so much the skill positions, but I think our lines are not comparable to the big leagues.
I do feel good that we can compete in the ACC against most teams. I don't think we can compete against Clemson or Notre Dame, but I will say that I feel like we got outcoached. I feel like we went into halftime with the lead, And it was almost like we either didn't make any adjustments or they made all the right adjustments, because they came out in the second half a completely different team, and we looked like we were in, shoes of concrete or something. It was just kind of sad. And if we made adjustments, they didn't work. And so we're going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board.
I'm not so sure they made adjustments. They were just running a lot of the same plays, but they were working in the second half, and that's because they were just starting to manhandle our defensive line. Whereas in the first half, we were getting a lot of nice pressure. We were stout against the run. I think our smaller guys just got worn out. So anyway, at the end of the day, it was an enjoyable experience because it was a really fun atmosphere. Scott Stadium was rocking. It's kind of an old rivalry. Maryland used to be in the ACC. And we had all kinds of cool stuff going on. We had the incredible skybox that we were in. We had in front of me were two U.S. Women's Olympic gold medal swimmers, Paige Madden and Kate Douglas. So it was really nice. I could reach out and touch them. They were right there. So it was fun. We were running into our, people, and it was a really cool atmosphere. You could feel there was some juice, a lot more excitement than has been the last few years for them. So
it was a lot of fun. It was
a good game. It was a lot of fun, great atmosphere.
Scott Stadium has gotten so much more of a show. It's incredible. They had fireworks. They had lights everywhere. It's quite a show now. I really enjoyed it. I will say that my last comment on the Cavaliers is that I do think the team has improved since last year.
Yeah.
Defense is significantly better and kept us in the game even when the offense couldn't do anything. But bottom line is you can see the measure against a really good team. We still have a ways to go. We still have a year.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be that prominent, but it was. I think our guys, when they were juiced up and had the energy and weren't tired, we could actually dominate them. But the physical domination that started to happen was something that you can't ignore. They were just leaning on us and just bulldozing us. And our guys were tired. And, I don't think we have the depth to rotate a bunch of different guys in to alleviate that kind of pressure. They were running long drives down our throat.
We couldn't stop the run in the second half at all. You can't win.
Yeah. And they were throwing on us too. Like it was, they just, they handled us, and it's because they have bigger recruits, they have bigger guys. And it felt like we were just from a smaller division. And so that kind of tells you where the ACC is. I will say we started the day number 1 in the ACC, which was hilarious. But nobody thinks we're number 1 in the ACC. But the top teams in the ACC have a legitimate shot because I think they were able to recruit. But I think the average team in the ACC is just a little too small and not athletic enough to really compete with the big boys. And that's a realization that isn't really an epiphany for anybody, but you can kind of see it in action.
That's right. Well, tonight we're going to talk about college football after week 3. We wanted to wait a couple weeks into the season because, we talked about this last week, that it doesn't really come to you whether a team's good or not until you get a couple weeks in. You can really tell what the team's made of. And after week 3, we kind of know who they're going to be. And so Rob and I, after week 3, have decided we're going to go ahead and go on record and talk about the teams we think are going to make the college football playoff. This year being an expanded format of 12. Very interesting way that they're doing it. They're going to have the winners of the 4 Power 4 conferences. Those winners will automatically get in and be number 1 seeds. So whether they could be ranked number 10, but if they win their conference and win their conference game, they're going to be a number 1 seed, and they'll get a bye in the 12th team playoff. The next 4 teams will be the next 4 teams ranked on the coaches ranking. And then the last 4 teams will be at-large teams. So they could come from any conference. They could come from the SEC, ACC, or a lot of people think that the awarding committee is going to give at least 1 team to one of the Power 5 conferences, one of the smaller conferences. So just to kind of mix it up and give everybody a chance. So any thoughts about how the season's gone so far? What are your biggest surprises? Who do you think is definitely in? Who do you think is definitely out? And then we'll take a look at the slide and see what your prediction is and mine is as well.
Well, I think The reason that expanding to more than 4 teams makes sense is the NFL has made a high priority parity, and college football has not. And where people get confused in college football is they think there's parity because you can bet on either side of the line. Gambling has made it confusing. You might put $50 down on Alabama minus 35 points or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it gives you a legitimate shot, but Alabama's going to blow out Bowling Green or whoever they play. It's not really a contest. So really the only games that really have upsets, I mean, in the first 3 weeks, there's really only been one upset, one true upset, Notre Dame. Other than that, in the first 3 weeks, Florida State is not as good as anyone thought. So you could say week 1 was an upset, but then after that, they're just not very good. So every time they've lost, now they're 0-3. I don't consider the last loss an upset at all. I just think they're reeling and they need a win from somewhere. That's, but at the end of the day, it's pretty predictable that the top couple teams, I would say there's 4 major teams that are at the top. A lot of pundits are saying there's 3 and then there's everyone else. But I put Alabama in there personally. I think the top 4 teams, I think the 2 finalists are going to come out of those 4 teams. I won't be surprised at all if the final 2 teams come out of the top 4 teams.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make the pool big enough, you're going to have some upsets in 12 versus 8 or whatever. And that's going to make it really exciting, I think.
Well, last week I had Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3. And after watching Georgia just struggle yesterday, and really they should have lost to Kentucky. I mean, the bottom line is Kentucky kind of physically beat them up all day long. And it was a 13-12 game. They nipped Kentucky at the end. It was a huge wake-up call to them. I don't know what team's going to come out after that. They may be angry and come blow the next team out. Probably will. But they look very vulnerable. Carson Beck, who's on the Heisman watch list of about 4 or 5 quarterbacks, really struggled against a very solid defense. And we'll see. I mean, I don't know if I'd put Georgia 1 anymore. I'd put them still in the top 4, but they may drop to 2 or 3.
The top 4 stayed the same, but they changed order, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say Ohio State now 1, Texas 2, Georgia 3. Georgia, I think, has dropped to 3, and I think you'll see that in the poll on Tuesday when it comes out.
I personally think Texas is 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, and Alabama 4, which is a little different than ESPN has it. But here's an interesting stat about Georgia. There's only 3 times in the last 5 seasons where they've been held below 20 points.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 times were Kentucky.
Wow.
Kentucky has their number for whatever reason. Can't explain it. The way they play defense keeps it close. Georgia gets rattled. They're not doing their normal things. You get them a little out of sync. And somehow Kentucky's the only one really able to do that for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they have more athletes than an Alabama or LSU. It's just they have some kind of scheme that works. And so it makes it a really close game, nail biter. And luckily for Georgia, they've pulled it out every time. But I don't read too much into that squeaker. There's a history there where they just have trouble with Kentucky, and I don't know why. So,
after seeing what they did to Clemson, I agree with you. I do think it should have been an upset, though. It seems like if you look at the stats, you look at everything else, the trend was
no question.
They should have lost yesterday, and somehow they squeaked out a win. So they just have to feel.
But what I'm saying is there's a pattern. Even when Georgia's winning national championships, go back and look at the Kentucky game. And that Kentucky game, it was the same way the last several years. So Georgia doesn't frequently get held down. Only the 3 times in the last 5 years did they have a game below scoring 20 points.
Mm-hmm.
But Kentucky was responsible for all 3 of them. So there it is. That to me, don't overreact to a squeak out win. If you get that win and you keep going against that team you have trouble with, you're still champion until someone knocks you off. So
I really like the 12-team playoff because, as you said, it's always been a league of non-parity, whereas
yeah,
NFL has always been parity. And now you're going to maybe have a little bit more because you're going to have, in terms of recruiting, you'll have a kid who thinks to themselves, okay, maybe I will go to Memphis, who, by the way,
Yeah.
just beat Florida State, or maybe I
Yeah.
will go to Northern Illinois because they can get playing time, and who just beat Notre Dame,
or Southern Miss,
or
or
App State. You have App
maybe
State.
even Vanderbilt. You have a shot
Yeah.
at getting on the field.
But some of these teams that are kind of in the group of five that are just outside of the top four conferences, they're going to feel like they have a chance, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's good for college football, and it's good for the playoff. It makes it much more interesting. Now, the
Yeah,
reality,
I don't think anyone wants to play Tennessee.
no.
Like,
But the reality is, let's say Memphis sneaks in, or Northern Illinois, or one of those teams. The reality is they're probably going to get blown out. But
yep.
I like that they're getting a shot as the number 12 seed. It's going to be
Well,
really
what's cool is
fun.
the top teams, for the most part, are probably going to get buys. So there's going to be a lot of good teams playing each other.
Mhm.
And when you get, 8 versus 10 or whatever, it's going to be real exciting. It's
Well, yeah,
because
and the reality is Texas and Alabama and Georgia are all going to beat each other up during the regular season.
yeah.
But reality is, all three of them are probably going to make the playoffs. So,
I'll give you an example.
by the way, people want to watch those games. People want to watch those games.
I'll give you an example of the lack of parity in college, okay? There were 2 teams in the top 25 that lost this weekend,
Mhm.
and both of them got beaten by higher seeded top 25 teams.
Right.
So, yes, Notre Dame lost last week, but go look at what's happening in the NFL and how the Raiders are beating the Ravens, and you know what I mean? It's like, it's insane.
It's been the craziest day I've ever seen in the NFL. But
So
we'll talk
this is
about
what I was trying to describe to you, where in the NFL, you're going to have a bunch of 9-8 teams.
Yep.
You might have 1 or 2 that are 12-5,
5. Mhm.
but most of them are going to be closer to even. You're not going to have 16-1s.
You have the Dallas Cowboys who blew someone out last week and then gets blown out today. It just it doesn't make any sense yet. And this is exactly why our predictions we call them the way too early predictions on NFL, because we didn't really know what we had yet.
No, because preseason was exceptionally unuseful this year in trying to gauge anything. A lot of the players that didn't play, really their first 2 games were preseason games. And actually, if you think about it, that's a lot like college, because college doesn't have preseason. And so your first couple games are usually against patsies, right? You'll see Ohio State play Mother St. Mary's or something and beat them 75-0 and not cover the spread. But, you have these blowout games that don't tell you very much. And then as soon as what was cool about this season so far is we have had some matchups, top 25 matchups.
Actually, they've done that on purpose.
I love that. I know. I love it.
Is moving up better games earlier, and they're moving up rivalry games.
So much better. So much better. However, if you're Michigan and you get manhandled in week 1, it doesn't eliminate you because everyone knows you weren't quite up to speed potentially. That's sort of like a preseason game. So I think people would be more likely to waive a bad week 1 and then, okay, let's look at the body of work once everyone kind of got knowing what they were doing. So you're starting to see patterns starting to develop that are going to be useful in telling you the real what's going to happen the rest of the
Clemson's
season.
the same way. I mean, if Clemson wins out, they're going to make the playoff.
Yeah. Yep. They got blasted. Actually, it was pretty close for a half, and then they got blasted in the second half, and then they've come back and they've been better. So you're certainly not dealing with a Florida State situation where Clemson is just awful all of a sudden. They're not. They're a really good team. They had a terrible second half against Georgia, but there's no shame in that. Georgia is one of the top teams, and they opened a can on Clemson, and Clemson just wasn't ready for it. But I think over a season, a body of work, if Clemson continues to improve, they'll be in the playoff.
If Notre Dame wins out, they'll make it too. If they win out 10-1.
Yeah, and you'll just chalk the Notre Dame loss, the upset, up to just a strange game where things just went wrong. But they got to win. They got some really good teams on their schedule, and Notre Dame's got to take care of business, or else they are going to be out, and that's just the way it goes.
That's right. Absolutely right. Well, why don't we go ahead and take a look at what we got?
All right.
All right, this is our episode 31, our college football 12-team playoff Sports Guyz predictions. So that's what we're going to get into today. I do have a couple headlines here I want to go through with you, Robbie. This is just to kind of go through these real rapidly and get your take on them. So the first one is Texas joins Georgia, Ohio State in the top tier. You agree with that?
I think they're number one. So, yeah.
Okay. So the one below that, I guess you also agree with, and I do too. Texas is a true national title contender.
Yeah.
I mean, they bring in Arch Manning, their second string guy, and he lights it up in the second half. So they're just so deep. Michigan has problems that may not be fixable this season.
Yeah, not to make a title run.
I mean, the Big Ten is tough.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's that brutal every year.
They're gonna get a couple more losses.
I think so. The Big 12 is a league you need to be watching every weekend. That headline's there because the Big 12 is just incredibly exciting this year. It really is. With Baylor and Utah and all these great teams that are out there that are just, if you like offense, Big 12 is where you want to be. Any thoughts on that? They're not the ground and pound league. They're the pass league, right?
I think they might get a little bit into the – I don't think they're at that top. I don't think they're at the top level. I think they'd be cannon fodder for the top four guys. But
I agree. I think this headline's not talking about them being at the top.
It's exciting. They're exciting to watch. It's fun football to watch.
Right. It's just a lot of scoring. 48-44 kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you're a defensive guy, you don't like the Big 12.
It's kind of like the Pac-12 was. It's kind of like the Pac-12 was. There's no defense on the field.
It's like in college basketball. College basketball, some of those Western leagues are the same way. There's just no defense. The college basketball game will be like, 88, 82. In the ACC, that would never happen because they actually play defense.
Right.
So Colorado doesn't look any different than last year.
I don't agree since last week. They
have some great players and they score, but
their defense came up big. Their offensive line performed better. They had a big win against Colorado State. So
they did.
I don't know if they don't look any different. I think they look a little better than last year.
Okay.
I think they're a little bit light in talent across the roster, but of course they have the incredible receiver and Shedeur Sanders throwing the ball. So expectations may be too high for them. I think expectations are down a little, more reasonable and realistic for Colorado, and so I think it's better.
So last year they started 4-6 and then lost their last 8, I think it was.
Yeah.
Started 4-2, lost their last 8.
They'll do better than that this year, I think.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah.
I think they'll be.
But they get way too much hype for their level of talent.
They have a lot of tough teams on their calendar. I don't think they'll be over 500. I think they'll be 6 and 7.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they make it to 500.
Next one's it's too early to write off teams in the race for college football playoff.
Yeah, except for Florida State.
Exactly. Already eliminated from the race.
Yeah. There's no coming back from those 3 losses.
One of the biggest surprises is this kid for Syracuse has just been lighting it up. He's actually leading the country in passing right now, passing yards, passing completion. His name's Kyle McCord. He's a transfer into Syracuse this year. And nobody really saw this guy coming, but it really seems to be a great fit there. Any thoughts on him?
I mean, not much other than he's off to a really impressive start. Seems like he's got all the tools.
Mm-hmm.
Syracuse is a scary team. You don't really want to play him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Georgia Tech was coming off that, the high of winning the big week 1 matchup, and then they go into Syracuse and lose. Mm-hmm. And everyone realized, oh, wow, Syracuse is pretty good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Next one is defense gives Nebraska a chance to contend. So Nebraska's sitting at 2-0, and they've been pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Mainly defensively. They just don't give anything up. They're kind of like you're giving them about 2 yards a carry. And Matt Rule has them playing some good ball.
Yeah. I think he's actually really good at building college programs. I think his style doesn't work in the NFL. If you were to ask me, do I think Matt Rule will have his team up in the top 15 consistently after next year? I think he will. I think he's headed for the top 25 consistently now. He gets a lot of good players. It's Nebraska. A lot of good players want to go there. And he's actually really good at building leadership and character in his players. And I think that shows up on the field. So he's perfect for college, and he was a disaster in the pros.
Completely agree. He's a program builder. That's what he is. So next one's Hugh Freeze, who came over from Liberty to join Auburn as their coach. And there's big expectations at Auburn. Essentially, they're the little brother of Alabama, and they always want to be Alabama. Came over last year, and to much fanfare, had come from Liberty, which was a smaller school, but had been very competitive and had been racking up 9-2 seasons a couple years in a row. Comes over, and they have a very disappointing 5-6 year last year, and then this year they're sitting at 1-2. And in Auburn, Alabama, that's just not acceptable. So is his seat getting hot?
I'll tell you honestly, I don't know. This is one where I don't know all the factors involved, how much leash he has, what the alumni are saying, if there's an understanding of somewhat of a rebuild going on, how much time he has. I don't know those factors. So I'm going to say I really have no idea. I know that Auburn expects not national championships, but to be at the top in the SEC every year. And if he's not, then I would say automatically he's got to be on the hot seat. But I also don't know what kind of leash he has, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to watch. Apparently, there is grumbling this year already in the circles who actually fund the Auburn program. And as you know, with NIL and with all the other things that are out there, your leashes are getting shorter for these coaches.
Yeah,
they don't have 3 to 5 years anymore. They really don't.
that's right. No, they don't. Because I'll tell you what, one thing that's happened is alumni are really quick to pitch a lot of money in for buyouts. That's something that has developed over the last 5 years, is these huge guaranteed contracts, and then people will walk in and pay a coach to go away for $60 million or whatever. That's crazy to pay a coach not to coach. Like, that's nuts. So people get on the hot seat faster if you're willing to do something about it, which means we're going to fire you and pay you all this money because we had some rich donors come up and they want a fresh coaching situation. So yeah, I think hot seats turn on a lot faster.
Speaking of hot seats, let's talk about Florida State. Their football fans are feeling the disappointment of an 0-3 start after a loss to Memphis. Florida State paid Memphis $2 million to play that game. So they pay him $2 million to lose to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how Florida State
Mind-boggling.
can possibly feel anything but they just must be pulling their hair out. And I mean, that coach is definitely on the hot seat. Last year, he was in line. He came in third in the Coach of the Year rankings. So he was essentially the golden child last year.
This is an odd one because I think he's a good coach.
Me too.
I'm not sure what's happened to the talent level there. They definitely missed on DJU, and him staying with DJU is hurting his team. And if the cupboard is bare in the quarterback room and he has no other options, then it's on him. But there are options to turn to in the portal, and also what's going on with your development program where you don't have multiple quarterbacks ready to go. But in general, I think he's a good X's and O's coach for the most part.
This shows you how fast you can fall from grace. And essentially last year he was, they were talking about maybe an NFL position for him one day and all this. And then Jordan Travis goes down the game before the final of the playoff. Essentially, they thought maybe he could get his team all the way to the final, and gets hurt the week before and gives Florida State no chance of advancing.
Yeah.
And from that day forward, Florida State has just not looked like the same team they were when they went 10-0 last year. And the question is there going to be pressure to bring in Coach Prime from Colorado, his alma mater?
Probably.
You know that's where he wants to go one day. There's no doubt in my mind that's where he wants to be.
If I'm Florida State, I'm real hesitant. I'm not sure Deion has been that good at recruiting.
Yeah.
Shedeur Sanders is your son. He goes to your school, and you got the one wide receiver.
And I'm not sure he's really that great a coach yet. I mean, it seems to me like Matt Rule really outcoached him last week when he lost in Nebraska. I mean, it was pretty evident. So I don't know. Recruiting and coaching, I think he's still learning on the job.
Yeah.
He's pretty new to it,
Yeah, and it's not that Deion can't get better and stronger in every area and get more aware of how to recruit and all that.
Is he a better coach than Coach Norvell? I don't think so.
No, I don't think he's a better coach on the field than Norvell, and I don't think he's as good a recruiter. So I think Florida State just got caught. They thought they were all covered because they transferred in DJU, but I think that was a Band-Aid on a really bad wound, and I don't think it's sufficient.
Yeah.
So, he's on the hot seat, but he shouldn't be, honestly.
When do you provide the hook for a guy like DJU? I mean, shouldn't they do it now at 0-3?
Now. Yeah, now.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
You know who's really good at handling these situations is Dave Dorn.
Mm-hmm.
He'll pull a quarterback who's not doing well, and he's able to get him to stay with the program, and then he'll turn back to him again, and he'll call on that quarterback and get better results out of him. So there are coaches out there who are doing this, and I think Norvell should have done that before this last game, probably.
For sure. So next one is Oregon must improve from the inside out after surviving 2 Idaho schools. They won their first 2 games, one of them by 2 points and one by 4 points against 2 really pathetic schools from Idaho. And just didn't look impressive at all for a team that they think might sneak into the college football playoff. What's the thought there? I mean, they lost Bo Nix. This quarterback that they brought in, they thought was going to be the next coming for Oregon, and he just hasn't worked out yet.
I think they're a perfect example of they needed a little time to gel. And I think what they just did to Oregon State, winning 49-14, Dylan Gabriel's their quarterback. He completed 83% of his passes, which is an awesome rating. He had 2 passing TDs. So far, he has 914 yards in 3 games, which means more than 300 per game, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 77.7 QBR. So there's a lot of positives in the quarterback situation. And then you looked at they've had some injuries on the offensive line, and they were healthy this week, and they were blowing people off the ball. I think Oregon is better than what they look like in the first 2 weeks. That's
so you think we're watching Gabriel improve right before our eyes, and by the end of the year, by the end of the year, they might be a contender.
Do I think they're going to be in the final 4 teams? No, but they're in the playoffs unless something tragic happens, like a bad quarterback injury or something.
Okay.
I think Oregon is starting to roll a little bit. They're starting to get gelled.
I can see that. The next one is second best team in the Big Ten is, and this is a big question mark. Usually it's pretty obvious, but this year, you got the Penn States of the world, and you got all these other new schools that have come out that are now part of the Big Ten, UCLA and USC, and they're all part of the Big Ten now. So the question is, who's number 2? Is it Penn State? Is it USC? Is it somebody else? I don't think it's Michigan.
I think it's USC.
It might be.
I think it's USC. They've shown a very good start to their season, beating LSU. They look like they're better than last year, actually. Even though they lost Caleb Williams, I think across their roster, they're a little stronger.
Well, their defense is playing better. Last year's defense was terrible.
Their defense was terrible last year. It's not terrible this year. So I think USC is an outside contender. They're going to be in the playoff, and they're going to go down pretty early, but they'll be in there.
I think USC and Penn State might have a shot. I think those are they're probably
I
number
agree.
3. Yeah.
Penn State's kind of unknown right now. They're 2-0. They look pretty solid, but just not a lot of information yet on some of the teams that had a lot of teams were idle this week. So it was just real strange.
So next one is pathway to the playoff for Tennessee is paved with defense. And the reason I think this really interesting headline came out was Tennessee for a couple of years now has been very explosive offensively, but has always kind of fell down in big games on the defensive side of the ball. They can't stop anybody. And this year they're playing really solid defense. So they actually play complementary football now. They're one of the better teams in college football, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they're right outside that top 4 guys.
Like around 5 or 6 or 7, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, they've done some impressive work. Everyone's saying, well, they haven't beaten anybody. Well, NC State was ranked by very high-level football people in the top 25 when they got beaten. They got smoked by Tennessee. Okay, Tennessee embarrassed them. So that was a big win. That was significant. Okay. And then they've beaten some bad teams really badly. That's not so easy all the time. Like, for instance, they just beat Kent State 71-0.
I know.
So what does that tell you? It doesn't tell you everything, but it does tell you that they're taking care of business.
And it tells you that they're taking defense seriously this year. That's what it tells you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I mean, what they did to NC State's supposed to be powerful offense.
Yeah.
He just completely frustrated them from beginning to end.
Imaliva has an 80.7 QBR. That's pretty good. And they're running the ball very effectively. Their running back, Dylan Sampson, has, 9 touchdowns, 7.9 yards a carry. So very powerful team. They've been beating up on bad teams, and they also have a signature win. And I think they have a lot of reason to believe that they're pretty stout on both sides of the ball.
Right. So last one there is Marcus Freeman's era at Notre Dame. This is his second season, includes yet another bad upset. He had a bad one last year and a bad one this year. This year, of course, was to Northern Illinois. Totally inexplicable how that could happen. Obviously, since then, they've been on a war path, and they've been blowing people out 66-10. And so have they righted the ship? Can they still make the playoff? Is this a habit of theirs to have a bad upset every year?
There's not a lot of parity in college football, and for whatever reason, they've had a few weird upsets. I think it's more the outlier and not the rule. They're going to have plenty of good teams to still play, so they're going to have to prove it. But I think they have a legitimate shot at getting the playoff. I do. I think that they're not going to do that much damage in the playoff, but I think they're going to make it in.
I think they might too. We'll see. Last thing there is the 5 quarterbacks that are in red. These are the ones that everyone who's a pundit says are the 5 top Heisman kind of candidates early in the season. You got Carson back with Georgia, Jackson Dart with Ole Miss, Quinn Ewers, who I think is probably leading right now for Texas, Cam Ward from Miami, who's fantastic, and then Jalen Milroe, who's really, you talk about announcing himself the last 2 weeks. My goodness. And then you have 2 other guys who are not on here, and that's USC's quarterback's pretty darn good, and then Missouri's quarterback is starting to make some notice.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts about who do you think's kind of the early leader in the clubhouse, or maybe 2 early leaders in the clubhouse?
I think Quinn Ewers' injury throws an interesting wrinkle here. I think Cam Ward has a legitimate shot. I think Jalen Milroe had a statement game. And they always have good wide receivers now, Alabama. So It's going to be a good race. I'm not sure Quinn Ewers is actually going to be in there at the end of it all. He might. Depends on how this injury rolls. But I'll tell you this. The reason Texas shot up my board is because Arch Manning proved that he's legitimate.
Right.
Ewers was blowing teams out. He goes out, hurt. Arch comes in, throws 5 touchdowns, scores 5 touchdowns, one of which was a 67-yard touchdown. And get this, he was running 21 miles an hour, which is as fast as Lamar Jackson can run.
Wow.
So are you kidding me? This guy has those kind of wheels and he's a Manning. That's incredible. He's running like Lamar Jackson, throwing for all these touchdowns. And
Eli and Peyton didn't have that.
It's like having Lamar Jackson, but a better thrower potentially as your backup quarterback.
Right. That's right.
That's your insurance policy? That's crazy.
Do you think he can work his name onto this Heisman watch list?
No, not Heisman list, but I will say they're not going to be quick to bring back Ewers with Manning, such a good viable option.
Until he's fully healthy, right?
They want a fully healthy Ewers, and he is the starter. There is 0 chance Manning beats out Ewers this year because he is known in Texas locker room as the better quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody has a backup like Arch Manning in college.
You're talking about a 1-2 punch. Yeah,
it's insane. You don't come in cold like that and light it up like he just did. So that's why they shot up the board, is because they're so secure at the quarterback position, and they have so much talent everywhere else. Right. So, that tells you none of these other quarterbacks have a backup that we're aware of that can compare to that. So they're set at the quarterback position, but I do think that hurts Ewers' not draft stock at all, his Heisman stock, because they'll keep him out a little longer than they have to make sure he's 100%.
Right.
Because they don't have as much riding on it, I think.
The only other guy who's not on here who probably would be if he was with a better team, that's Shedeur Sanders. And I just think that they're probably going to end up at 5-6 or 6-6 or something. And I just think the committee doesn't give a Heisman to a guy who goes 6-6. I just don't see it.
Well, I will say this: if Shedeur Sanders is able to pull off some victories that they really shouldn't, he should be considered because he's elevating his team above its talent level at that point.
Mm-hmm. True.
Because they're not a very talented team. They've got some incredible pieces surrounded by real mediocre talent. Mm-hmm. And so if we're getting wins out of such a limited roster, then the quarterback leading that should get much higher consideration than normal on a mediocre team. So,
I will say, if you just look at this sheet alone with Kyle McCord and the USC quarterback and the Missouri quarterback and Shedeur Sanders and these 5 guys, my comment about the NFL having really poor quarterback play in week 1 and 2, it's just the opposite in college. It seems like there's just a lot of great guys right now.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Last year was supposed to be this incredible draft, which it was, of all these quarterbacks, and everyone was scrambling to get up the draft board to grab these guys because no one was available this year. And look how crazy that is. There are very good options here. Now, some of them are going to be busts. Some of them are going to be just athletic guys who can run a lot, but that doesn't transfer very well into the NFL so much. And limits a lot of the passing, which we have a whole nother conversation about that. But for the most part, I think the idea that this year is a really down year for quarterbacks is completely wrong.
And you remember what we said? You and I said this in the draft special we did some months ago. We said that there will be guys that emerge. And this idea that there's only Quinn Ewers and Shedeur Sanders and that's it, that just wouldn't be true. That there were going to be guys.
Week 3. We're in week 3, and we already have a full slate of potential first-round picks. Not all of them are going to be first-round picks, but all of them have potential. And so all of them, depending on how their season goes, there's probably 10 guys that could be first-round picks. Out of that, how many really will be? Probably 4 or 5. 4. But that's not a bad quarterback year. And so there's a lot of good options. There's going to be a lot of good second-round pick quarterbacks who probably end up being starters and potentially good third-round pick guys. So a lot of good quarterback play in general in college so far this year. Some of them are going to go down with injury. Some are going to be disappointing. Guys like DJU are going to be underperforming, and you're going to be scratching your head why. But for the most part, the idea that this is a really bad quarterback year is completely false, completely wrong.
Now, how are you feeling if you're Texas and you know that Quinn Ewers is graduating, and you got Arch Manning coming behind him? I mean, don't you feel pretty secure?
You feel fine. And not only that, it's going to help in recruiting, because if you're a lineman, you're going to be able to come in and be with Arch Manning for 2 years. You know, so yeah.
Yeah. Arch Manning, by the way, making $2.5 million in NIL this year.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. All right, let's take a look. This was the bracket that was filled out by the Action Network right before the season started. This is what they thought was actually going to happen, and this was them locking in their picks. And boy, am I really fortunate that you and I didn't do this 3 weeks ago, and we waited until week 3 because you can see some real changes here. The first one, of course, being Florida State. They predicted would be the number 3 seed. That's not going to happen.
As we know. I don't see Boise State in there.
Boise State, at the time, they thought might be that number 12 team that sneaks in. You remember when we had our episode a week ago with Armani Edwards, he said it was going to be App State.
Who's not on this list? Tennessee's nowhere to be found.
Boise State's not going to make it. Okay. Tennessee, no one had any idea they were going to be that good. So Tennessee is going
needs to be in there. Ole Miss, they're not on this list.
Ole Miss is not here. And also Michigan probably will not be making the playoff.
Michigan won't be.
I don't see that happening.
Missouri. Okay, Missouri is there.
Missouri probably
Miami's in.
Yep,
if things continue forward for Miami, if Cam Ward stays healthy and all those things, they should be in there.
So this was their predictions right before the season, and that it'd be Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State at the top, and then you see they had Georgia and Ohio State playing in the final. That was their prediction. So now let's look at kind of what it's like coming after week 3. Now you see it's Ohio State against Miami and Georgia against Utah. Utah being a very solid team this year, with Texas potentially sneaking in there as well. They've got their number 12 team as Northern Illinois. They're the ones who just knocked off Notre Dame. I'm not so sure about that. They've got Tennessee at the 9 seed. I think they're going to be higher than that.
A little higher.
I like them around 6 or 7.
Yeah.
They do have Ole Miss in this one because Jackson Dart's playing so well. They have Oregon sneaking into this bracket. They have Missouri coming in. So you can see things have changed a lot in the last 3 weeks.
Yep.
Any problems with these that you have so far with Nick Bromberg?
Tennessee needs to be a little higher. Missouri. Who's 12?
12 is Northern Illinois. They're the ones who knocked off Notre Dame.
Oh yeah. No, that's absurd. USC probably up in there. And
USC isn't even on this list, and I think
Miami's not on the. Oh yeah, they are. Sorry.
Yeah, they
are. Yeah, USC probably up there, and Northern Illinois not up there.
And what about Clemson? I think Clemson still might make it.
Clemson probably maybe in as a 12.
And I like Texas way higher than 5. I think that's crazy.
Yeah. Texas has to be.
And I don't think Georgia's going to be
Texas
1. I think
might be number 1.
After watching Georgia play yesterday, I think they may get at least 1 L, which would
I think it's possible that Penn State's not in.
Yeah.
I would say that
I think Clemson will get in over Penn State.
Clemson will get in over Penn State, and USC will get in over Northern Illinois.
Probably so. Yeah.
That's pretty much close to. I would change some of the numbers around a little, but that looks pretty good.
I put Texas at 1 or 2, and I'd put Tennessee around 6. I think they're going to be
I
higher
go
than that.
Texas
They're very good
1,
team.
Texas goes to 1, Georgia goes to 5. No, yeah,
Georgia
because
goes to
they
4.
won't have top 4 out of SEC. So the highest Georgia could go is 5. And Alabama 6, I agree. I think 3 out of the top 4 teams are SEC. So
Did you notice that there's, what is it, 5 ACC, I mean, 5 SEC teams on this list? I mean, that's
yeah,
astounding out of 12. But I think that's
yeah.
true. I think that's true.
No, absolutely, it's true.
And they're
They got 3
predicting
of the
here.
top 4.
They're predicting here ACC with 1, Big 12 with 1. So
I think 2 for ACC. Clemson sneaks up there, but they're in like that 12th spot. So that's just my prediction. No way to predict injuries.
here's
And
another bracket that
no
came
way to
out.
predict upsets, but there probably won't be very many upsets.
This is the bracket that came out from Sports Illustrated on Thursday. Of course, this was before Georgia underperformed. They had Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Utah 3, and Miami 4. And then they had SC sneaking in at 10, like you talked about, which I agree with.
Yeah.
They had Memphis
No.
coming in at 12. They think they're a really solid team. And this was
No.
before they beat Florida State.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so
They're having a great season. They'll be right outside the top 12, I think. But no. I mean, I think Notre Dame might sneak in if they can hold serve.
Exactly. Yeah. I see Utah at 4 because they're going to get the 4 seed just because they're going to win the Big 12, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It doesn't mean they're the 4th best team. It just
But
means they
neither of these are that far off.
Here's another one. In this one, you've got also Northern Illinois at the 12 seed. I think it's just overreaction Monday. I really do. Just because they beat Notre Dame. None of these brackets have Notre Dame in it. And I think that they really have a good shot of sneaking in at like the 11 seed, maybe something like that.
There's some recency bias with how shocked everyone still is that they got upset.
And Clemson. I think Clemson.
That recency bias goes away if they lay down some nice wins, and it's still Notre Dame, and same with Clemson.
The team, Clemson and Notre Dame and USC are the 3 teams that I think will sneak into this picture over the course of the season. And you talked about
something's telling me that Penn State is on that bubble and may not make it in.
Mm-hmm. So this picture also is assuming Texas loses to Georgia in the SEC title game. I don't know about that. I think Georgia might be the 5 seed, like you said.
Georgia's going to be the 5 seed. Texas the 1 seed. Alabama 6, yeah.
No, we'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see. All right, so let's go ahead and make our prediction on this bracket.
On this bracket?
Let's do it on this bracket. And you can slide another team in if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be Georgia, Texas in the finals.
You do?
Yep.
What if they're on the same side like they are right here?
If they're on the same side, then it's going to be Ohio State, Texas.
Okay.
Ohio State has such a good roster that their backup running back is being considered for a first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
They're loaded. They're not going to have as good a competition as the SEC guys are, but I think they're going to be walloping teams.
I have on this list here, I have Memphis as the 12. I really think they're sitting at 3-0. I think they're playing really well. I think they might be the 12. They might be that at-large team that comes in. I think USC's going to make it. I think Clemson's going to make it, and I think Notre Dame might make it.
So who's out?
So they're going to knock out
Northern Illinois, of course.
Northern Illinois potentially. Penn State might not make it.
I think but you said 3 in. So who's the third out?
I think if Penn State gets a loss or 2, they'll be out. Ole Miss, I'm not sure about because they're kind of the low on the totem pole of this SEC list. If they
Yeah.
get a loss or two, they might not make it.
What I
So
like about Ole Miss is they have the best running back in football, and they also have a nice quarterback. So they have a balanced offense that can really punish you. They can put teams away. They have a dangerous amount of talent. The problem is they play in a division that's so brutal. So
I think whoever is the 5 seed, as you see, is going to have to play one extra game. Whether it's Georgia or Texas, I think it's going to be Georgia. I think Georgia will be the 5 seed. I think they're going to blow out the 12 seed, and then they're going to blow out Utah. Utah cannot hang with
yeah,
SEC teams.
I
Okay?
agree.
And then
But
they're
here's
going to
the
be,
problem.
and then they'll be heads up with Texas.
I think all these good SEC teams, one of them is going to be on the wrong end of a couple of beatings. And so while they have the talent to be in the 12 for sure, one of them is not going to be here for some reason.
So I see it.
No way to
I see
predict it right now.
I see it as Georgia and Texas in one semifinal, and I think Texas will get it done. And I see Ohio State and who are they going to play? I don't think it's going to be Miami. Probably Alabama.
Alabama.
I
Alabama's
like
good.
Ohio State, Alabama in the other semifinal, and then I
Yeah.
like it to be Texas and Ohio State in the final.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Texas to get it done. I think they're going to be national champs this year.
I do too.
It just feels like they're rolling.
Yeah.
All right, so I got my champion at Texas. Who do you have?
Texas.
Okay. All right, you guys got us on record. All right, let's look at the ACC. Any of these teams you think can sneak in to the final 12?
Miami
Well, they're definitely in. I mean, I just think there's no question they're going to make
and Florida State. No, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke. I think Clemson and
Mhm.
no, that's pretty much it. I'd like to say NC State, but I just don't think their quarterback situation is settled.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that this year.
I don't know.
And I'd like to say maybe a Syracuse or a Boston College, one of those guys that has a really good quarterback could sneak in there, but I just don't think they have a good enough team around them to, they'll end up getting 2 or 3 losses and they'll get.
I mean,
knocked out.
Louisville on paper, because they're ranked, could get up there. They're ranked 19th right now. If they have a special season, but I don't anticipate it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What about SEC? Any of these teams that are, there's 5 they're already projecting to be in: Alabama,
Missouri,
Georgia.
Ole Miss.
Yeah, but what about like an LSU? Can they
Tennessee.
go on a run and sneak in? Or
Mm,
Texas A&M has been playing really well.
yeah, they have. I just think it's going to be Alabama, Texas, Missouri, Ole Miss, Tennessee.
Yeah, those 5 definitely. I guess they're not going to let a 6th sneak in, although they potentially could. LSU will probably be playing really good ball at the end of the year. I'll bet you.
Yeah, I don't think there's much chance of more than 5
Mm-hmm.
because they're all going to beat each other. Some of these teams are good teams, but they're in this brutal division.
Like South Carolina's a really good team.
Yeah.
And yet they're playing a brutal team every week.
South Carolina's a good team.
Yeah.
Kentucky always,
Texas A&M's a good team.
Kentucky always plays Georgia tough. You never know what you get with Auburn. Sometimes they overachieve, and
They're decent. Oklahoma's pretty good,
yeah, it's such a strong division
It's
that
crazy. You got even
they
stronger.
they all have to beat each other, though. That's the weird thing is some of these teams aren't coming out into the 12 because they got to play Georgia. Then the next week they play Alabama. It's so ridiculous.
It's true. So Big 12, okay, only team they're projecting to make it is Utah. But there's a couple of other teams there's Kansas, Kansas State, Arizona. You got a couple of these teams that are still unbeaten.
Yeah.
And any of these teams, I don't think Colorado can make it. They're going to end up being about 500. But Any of these other teams, Kansas, Kansas State, Arizona.
I don't think so because I think the powerhouses are very easy to see this year. And I don't think there's going to be that add-on team.
So you talked about lack of parity. That really allows
Yeah.
you to crystallize who's going to be that final 12 like you and I just predicted.
Yeah.
So you just
Yeah,
think
there's a lack of parity.
so only Utah out of this one.
Mm-hmm.
What about Big Ten? You got Ohio State, yes. You've got
Yeah.
USC. We think USC will make it, both of us.
I think USC's in.
So that's 2. You can't tell me they're just going to get 2. So who's going to be the third?
Penn
team to get
State,
there?
maybe.
Probably Penn State, right?
Yeah.
Although if Penn State makes
If they
it, then
falter, if Penn
Yeah.
State falters, you could open up for Michigan.
you could look at a Wisconsin maybe, although they just got blown out.
They got blown out. I think Michigan could right the ship and get up there, but I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying if
For
anyone
Washington's
has
looking
a
decent.
shot, it could be somebody like Michigan that
Yeah.
has, a real solid rosters.
It seems like this is such a great conference, and yet they're going to get 1 or 2 into the playoff. That just seems a little, I don't know. Seems a little short.
Yeah, I think USC coming up kind of saved them this year because I don't think it's not a great division this year.
Mm-hmm. It's Ohio State and everybody else. And let's be honest.
It's Ohio State.
Well,
Yeah.
and also Oregon. I mean, Oregon's got a shot
Oregon's coming up.
if
and we'll
Gabriel keeps
see,
playing
but
well.
They didn't play great weeks 1 and 2, but this last weekend showed me that they're right on that edge.
If they
of
go on a
getting-
run and they go 11-0, they're going to get in.
Mhm.
They'll be one of those.
Very
last
good chance of
10,
getting
11.
in. Very good
Yeah.
chance.
Mhm.
Yeah, I should have said Oregon. They're definitely more than 50% chance of getting in, I
So
think.
good shot they'll have 3 in: Oregon, Ohio State, and USC. That's probably the 3
Yes.
teams. I think Penn State's going to falter.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. All right, last one's the independents. You got Notre Dame, UConn, UMass, and then you've got Oregon State and Washington State. These are the 5 teams left that are essentially independents, although Pac-12, they're trying to rebuild right now.
Mm-hmm.
Any of these have a chance of getting in.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, and that's why I put their symbol up there.
That's the only one.
I don't think any of these other teams are quality enough.
No.
We had this big news on Wednesday night that Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State are going to leave the Mountain West to join Oregon State and Washington to rebuild the Pac-12. So they're trying to rebuild it into the 5th conference. Pretty interesting.
I like it. I think that's cool.
You got Boise, Colorado State, Fresno State, San Diego State. Those are pretty good football teams right there.
I like the Pac-12 more than I like the Mountain West. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think the Pac-12 has a better brand than the Mountain West would, I would think.
Yeah, it's also got its own personality. It's high flying, lots of scoring.
And also geographically, they're all out there. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. Geographically, it makes sense.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. All right, final thoughts on the college football playoff and your predictions. Are you feeling good about it? Is there anything you think that could happen that's wild, crazy? Any big upsets that could happen?
Georgia is scary good. Ohio State has an incredible roster. So they're very, very good competitors for Texas. So I don't sit here saying that Texas is going to run away with this thing. I could easily see the light going on for one of those teams. I think Miami is surprisingly good this year. So they might be able to make some noise, get into that Final Four or something.
There's no reason Georgia can't still be the number 1 seed. I'm thinking they won't be, but there's no reason they can't. If they go on a huge run here in the next 5-6 weeks and get back to being Georgia.
Yeah. And you'd have to study the entire pattern of all the scheduling, but basically everyone has still some tough games on their schedule. So those will determine if we got the order wrong or if one or two bounce out and one or two bounce in by having big wins. So
I think those top 4 are solid. I
Mhm.
think that like 5 or 6 are solid, and I think 7 and below, I think it's going to be scrambled. I think we're going to
Yeah,
see
I
one
agree.
coming in. Clemson's in this week. Now they're out because they lost to Georgia Tech or whatever.
I'm
So,
kind of surprised at Alabama. I think they're really solid,
mhm,
and I think that it's real easy to think that they're gonna slip because of no Saban,
mhm.
but man,
They're
they're
coming.
good.
They're coming.
They're good, and they're under the radar, and I don't know.
And
I don't know.
Milroe, it's like the light bulb went off for him. Last year, he
Yeah,
was mainly a runner and he couldn't pass very well.
yep.
But something happened this year, and he's like
And here's the
in his
thing,
second year, his
Mil
light bulb went off.
Milroe has 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, and he's averaging a little over 50 yards a game rushing. So he's a true dual threat, which in college is more effective than it is in pros, I think.
Rob, he had a 62-yard rushing touchdown the other day. That was a broken play. It wasn't even a called run.
I
It was
know.
supposed to be a pass.
He's a
And
serious
I mean,
athlete, and
you don't see that anymore. Where a guy on a broken play just takes off and goes 62 yards for a touchdown. Wow.
I know. You don't see quarterbacks doing that. Um, so I think that there's a tremendous grouping at the top that will pick. They will one of the national champion will come out of that group.
I agree.
I'll be very surprised if one of those 4 teams doesn't win the national championship. I'll
Mhm.
have to come on doing mea culpa because, you know,
What are the chances of like an 11 or 12 seed like shocking the world and upsetting and getting
winning
to
the
the
whole thing or getting
like getting to
into
the
the
final? Let's say getting like Memphis getting to the final. What are the chances?
almost 0.
5% probably.
Yeah, could they win the first game? Yes.
I
That would be
think you
shocking, but it would be
you
like,
might see
"Wow,
an
that was
upset or
a cool
two.
game."
You might
Yeah,
see an upset or two that'll
yeah,
make you feel that the college football playoff was smart to expand. You might see
yeah,
1 or 2 really
yeah,
good ones.
for sure. I think this year, there's really the haves and the have-nots, though. Like, I don't know if there's a TCU that's gonna come up and get in there, and uh, I don't know. Maybe.
It
It's
it
only
feels
week
like
3.
it feels like in the NIL transfer portal era, the haves and the have-nots is getting even more stark. It's getting wider and wider and wider.
I think it definitely is at this time. I don't know if it's gonna continue to be a trend or if it's just how it is this year.
And what
Um,
you're seeing is the teams that do struggle that are in those top 15 are the ones that have a new QB that transferred in that they weren't sure what they had, like
mhm,
DJU,
yeah,
or a new coach. And sometimes it takes a coach a year or 2 to really solidify his system.
yeah.
And, so you're seeing that too. You're seeing some of the bigger programs. I
I
mean,
think next year
Norvell's only in his 2nd season, so, I
I
mean, you
think
know,
next year you're gonna see, Matt Rule get Nebraska up there into the top 12.
I think so.
I think so.
I could
He's
see
he's
that.
building this program up. It had a long way to come back from because they had really slipped.
Do you think Neon Dion stays at Colorado after his son and Travis Hunter leave?
No,
Where do you think he's going?
that I don't know
Because
because
I agree with you.
I don't think Florida State's gonna get rid of Norvell. I think they're too smart for that. I think they're gonna have to reevaluate their NIL situation and do a hard push. Maybe look internally at what is their recruiting mechanism that they have in place. Maybe revamp that.
But you agree he wants to move up to one of the major
Yeah,
programs,
he would
one of
love
the
to go to
top.
Florida State. I just don't. I don't think they would love to have him. I think he brings a bit of a circus, and I think they want to be taken seriously. And they'll go get one of Georgia's, you know, second in command or
I
Ohio
will say
State second in
you were
command or
talking
something.
about his recruiting, and I agree with that, but he was able to pull in Travis Hunter, and he was able to do that at a D1 AA school before
Yeah.
he even joined Colorado.
No,
That was
he
impressive.
has a few wins on his recruiting, but not very many. And he has real trouble recruiting linemen. And,
Yeah.
first of all, I wouldn't want to play cornerback for Deion Sanders.
Phew.
Can you imagine the pressure? I mean,
I just don't
he
know if
was
he's gonna wanna coach Colorado. They don't have the talent most
no,
programs do,
no,
after
he
his
wants
son of us are not there. I just don't see it.
He wants to get into one of these top 15 programs, top 20 programs, and
Colorado
try
was a stepping
to elevate
stone.
them.
Colorado was a stepping stone.
No
Yeah.
question. When Shadur's gone, I think he's going to open up his phone lines and say, I'm available off camera. Like, he's not going to make it public, but
Give me a call. Yeah.
yeah, give me a call. Southern Miss, or I don't know, somebody in the SEC. He wants to go to one of the top 25 teams, I think.
I'll tell you, I really love college football, and I'm really excited that they did this 12-team playoff. I'm really happy
Yeah.
they did it. They should have done it a long time ago. The 14 playoff to me wasn't representative enough of enough teams to really feel like you had the national champ every year. So I like the little tournament. They're trying to do a little mini version of basketball with March Madness, and the players will end up playing one additional game than they would have. So there's a health concern there, but
Yeah.
in the end, it's just great for college football fans. I'm so excited about it.
I felt like they should have jumped from 4 to 8 to see if 8 was sufficient because of that concern. I think it's a little bit too many games. If you're a wild card equivalent, like NFL wild card, if you're number 12 or 11, you got to play multiple elimination games to get all the way to the semifinals, and it just, I don't know. I think 8 would have been interesting to try for a while, see if that's enough teams,
Mhm.
and then expand it to 12 if it felt like it wasn't.
And every time I think that the bowls are going to go away because there's like 50 bowls and only about 10 of them are really watched. Nobody cares about the other 40 at all. And in this new system with bowls being less and less important, I kept thinking they were going to go away, but apparently they're working the bowls into this playoff
Mhm.
somehow. And so
Yeah.
I guess they're never
I
going
think
to go away. The bowls want to stay where they are, and that's just how it is.
I think the bowls are a perfect merge between the NCAA and the business community, melting
They want to get their name up on the
sports.
bowl. They want to get their name up on the
Yeah.
stadium,
They wanna do the Duke's mayo, like dumping mayo on their coach, on the winning coach, and they wanna the alumni love it, going to Jacksonville, Florida, or some cool city and partying and reliving the old days and rooting for your team, and
Mhm. And the idea that if your team gets 6 wins, you should go to a bowl game. I guess I'm not completely against that, but I just
no, it's fun, it's cool.
there's so many bowls that nobody cares about.
I
But
know. But you know who does care about it? It doesn't hurt anybody that there's a weed
players,
whacker bowl,
the
but the
players.
alumni love it. The kids work hard and they get rewarded with that. There's also a reward for the team that
Mhm,
is getting all those extra weeks of practice.
mhm.
There's a practical
Oh, I can see why the coaches would want it, absolutely.
yeah. But the players want it. It's a reward for a season. Everyone wants to feel like they poured their heart and soul into a season that mattered.
Mhm.
Um, it's really exciting to go on the road and cheerleaders are there and your family's there. Like, it's cool. Bowls are cool. I don't think this diminishes the exciting part of bowls, and there's nothing like that in any other sport.
No
I
doubt.
mean, you could say that the Sweet 16 is kind of like that, and the different parts of the basketball
Mhm.
championship are, but bowl games are real unique to college football. There's
No
nothing
question.
like it in the pros. So I think they should fight to keep that for sure.
I kind of agree with you. They maybe should have done a step up to 8 and then 12 in the future, but I think they knew they eventually were gonna go to 12 anyway, so let's go ahead and rip off the Band-Aid and go to the new
Yeah.
system, try to make it
I,
more like March Madness.
I think we should jump to 8 and seeing where the pitfalls were and the benefits and the challenges that we were going to face if we made it even bigger. And then,
Because I mean, what's the great thing in college? The regular season games mean so much. They mean even more than the NFL regular season game, right? But what does the NFL always have over college football? They always had the playoff system, and that's what meant so much. And
yeah,
college hadn't had that, and so now they're trying to keep what means so much, which is regular season games are really important, but add what is really great in the NFL, which is playoffs.
yeah. Well, also NFL has something college doesn't. That's fantasy football. which makes you zoom in on individual players more. So there's a more of a focus on everybody following, because I'll watch the Cincinnati versus Cleveland game because I have a player on each side of that. It's going to determine whether I go to the playoffs. That's really cool that we get to play along as fantasy football owners of teams.
No doubt.
College doesn't have anything like that. So
It's true.
a lot of these sports have their own really cool, unique piece that they hang on to, as and I think college, one of the coolest things they have is the bowls. And I think mix it into this national championship and you've got all the best of both worlds.
Well, come here at the beginning of February. We're going to see whether Rob and I are right. Georgia versus Texas, Texas with the win, or Texas versus Ohio State, one of those combinations. Texas with a win, and we'll see how far off or how much we nailed it. And really excited about this season. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of great content coming your way, and really glad that you hung in there with us during this college football playoff prediction show. Any final thought, Robbie?
Not too much. Just college football is really exciting, and it's really cool to watch these student athletes competing as hard as they do and set themselves up to line up for the NFL and see if they got a shot. The bowl games are exciting. There are upsets, but not as many as you might think. But I don't know. The season's really off to an interesting start. I think the first two games are really like preseason for college kids. And so I think this is when you start to see real talent levels and everyone gets practice. And so anyway.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see you guys next time on the Sports Guys. Have a great night.
Take care.